It's time for another Ask WrestleJuice. You guys left a bunch of great questions. We're going to go ahead and dive into them. First up, I thought this was a fun question because it's kind of something that every wrestling fan, to a degree, I think, can relate to a little bit. Because wrestling, let's face it, can be absurd. It can be cringy sometimes. When it's at its best, it is so much fun. But, as is the case with, for example, sitting there in your living room watching Bobby Lashley's Sisters or Bayley This Is Your Life or what have you, the Champ 3875 here asks, what was the most embarrassing time for you to be a wrestling fan? Now, I love the absurdity of wrestling. I love the drama, the comedy. But, you know, if you go out in public and people are like, hey, you know, what are you into? I'm into WWE, you know, like the wrestling. Sometimes you'll get some asshole who's like, oh, I like the real stuff, the UFC. That's fine. That's great. It's a totally different thing. But there are some things in pro wrestling that sometimes can be kind of embarrassing to watch. And I was thinking, what era, what stretch of time, not just one single segment, what era, what stretch of time was it sort of like the most, like you're just sitting there and people walk in, and regardless of what, you know, week it is, if you're watching Monday Night Raw or SmackDown or whatever, you know there's a good possibility you're going to be like, oh, God, I can't believe I'm being caught watching this stuff. And at first I thought, oh, maybe it's like the celebrity guest host era. But then I was like, nah, you know what? If somebody were to walk through and they're like, hey, is that Hugh Jackman? It's like, yeah, he's on the WWE Raw, even though that was kind of a dog shit era because it coincided with the PG era where the writing was just horrible because basically Vince McMahon had made sure that it was like G rated and not even PG rated. I feel like the guest host era, as a wrestling fan, it was bad, but I don't think it was the most embarrassing because oftentimes they'd have celebrities who were actually kind of relevant. Which brings me to the Ruthless Aggression era. Because week after week after week, you had that old piece of shit, Vince McMahon, doing the cringiest shit imaginable that nobody in their right mind would look at and be like, oh man, this is great. This is cool. This is awesome. Whether it was the bark like a dog Trish Stratus stuff or when he said that word on television, regardless of what it is, Vince McMahon just made himself too much part of the Ruthless Aggression era. You never knew what you were going to get. You never knew what you were going to get. Usually it was just Vince being a disgusting, lecherous scumbag on your television. And I'll be honest with you, like, nobody would want to publicize that they were watching that and enjoying it. So I would go with the Ruthless Aggression era. I'm kind of curious what you guys have to say about that, though. Let me know in the comments below. Maybe I've got some older friendos who were around and adults in the 80s growing up during the golden era of wrestling. Maybe it was worse back then. I don't know. Let me know. I'm kind of curious what some wrestling historians out there might have to say about that. Alexander Ball says, is the popularity of WWE's cinematic segments proof that Lucha Underground was ahead of its time? Yeah, actually, that's a pretty good point. I don't know. Like, I didn't watch a lot of Lucha Underground. I watched a couple episodes here and there. It's actually kind of on my list of things I'd like to get around to at some point because everybody speaks so highly of it. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody be like, oh, Lucha Underground, that was crap. Real great look to the show. They did the cinematic stuff. Yeah, I kind of feel like they were kind of ahead of their time, given the times that WWE these days do the cinematic stuff. It's actually really good. So yeah, I definitely say that. I think a lot of people sort of understood that too while it was around. That it's like, wow, they're doing stuff that wrestling just doesn't do and maybe should look in mainstream, bigger wrestling WWE doesn't do, and maybe they should look into it. Enigma 2 says, do you think it's strange that in the Vince documentary there was no mention of the Saudi pay-per-view deal? Does it surprise me? Not necessarily, because I feel like it would. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure that it's, I know amongst like normal people, like the fan base and whatnot, obviously the deal and what Saudi Arabian government is trying to do with that, with Live Golf, et cetera, is pretty shady stuff, right? That being said, I don't know necessarily that it would be considered, like, certainly it's not considered a bad business deal from WWE standpoint, making a lot of money. Honestly, like, sort of, it's become kind of doing business with the Saudi Arabian government. I think has been kind of a normalized thing in business. So I'm not really surprised that it didn't land in there. I think that Vince, the one thing that kind of surprised me that wasn't really in it all that much was kind of the nature. More, I think if they dive more into the nature of Vince selling the company, which I don't think they did too deeply, maybe because, it seemed like he was trying to get out of having to be stepped down from the company with the Endeavor deal, and then it sort of backfired on him. So maybe they could have focused on that more, but I'm not really surprised because, there are a lot of big entities out there who do business with the Saudi Arabian government. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. And I don't think, so no, I'm not really surprised. Blake Whitehouse says, is everyone overreacting to Bryan Danielson's full-time career being over when the reality is he'll basically have the tribal chief setup of the AEW? Yeah, kind of. I have noticed a lot of people talking about him retiring, but he's not really retiring. I don't know how long he's going to be gone for. I suspect Danielson is not going to want to be gone from pro wrestling that much. I just don't. I have no idea. Honestly, the dude does such a great job with misdirection. I guess I can kind of take him at his word that he needs neck surgery, but I don't know the guy's personal medical info, and he's not above feeding the public information to help further stories. I think that he'd be okay, basically. I don't want to say lying, but, exaggerating certain things to try to get the most impact out of a big angle. And I think it's totally fine to do that. I wouldn't criticize the guy at all for that. But he will be back and he will wrestle. My guess would be he's going to be wrestling 5 to 6 times a year, which is the Roman Reigns setup right now. So, yeah, no, I do think that there is like a sentiment that's like, oh, he wants to go out on his own terms. He's not really going out, though. He's going to be back, and he's going to be wrestling several times a year for AEW. I just have that feeling. I just feel like that's going to be the case. So I kind of feel like the Wrestle Dream, in terms of the context of his career, I don't know if this guy is ever going to retire. Maybe he'll do a Sting at 65 years old situation, but he's in phenomenal shape, and he's always been in phenomenal shape. So I could see this guy wrestling for a very, very, very long time. So yeah, the overreaction, it's an outpouring of love and appreciation for the guy on, a very significant moment in his career when he's decided I'm not going to do this full time anymore. I'm going to dial it down and be more of a family guy, but he's going to be around. So yeah, kind of, I don't know. Here's a pretty deep question from DJ Solo 2925 says, were you ever at a point where you just weren't feeling doing content creation anymore for whatever reason? And if so, how'd you get rid of that feeling? I've never been at a point in my career since 2009 when I first started doing YouTube professionally. I got the call from Larson, Machinima needs a voice guy. Machinima needs an editor. Okay, I'm in. When I started doing that, at the same time I was editing for the Sacramento Kings for their digital division. At that point, until today, I've never wanted to do anything but this. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't gone through stretches of a couple days at a time when I'm like, man, I don't know when I'm going to do a video. That's why I kind of appreciate that here at WrestleJuice. At the very least, I've been able to find a couple of formulas that work, whether it's this, like the asking question things, whether it is the good idea, bad idea thing. I've got some ideas for some more ambitious stuff coming up that I'm hoping to film this coming weekend, my first one. I've never not wanted to do content creation in that entire time. I've never been like, I want to step back from the podcast. You're always trying to figure out how to make things better, how to improve the product, how to, appeal to more viewers, et cetera, et cetera. I've never not once been like, I don't want to do this anymore. Never. I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to be doing it for, but if it's up to me, I'm going to do it until I can't anymore. Maybe there'll be some point where I'll be like, I want to, in my 60s, when I'll think to myself, I want to focus on doing that comic book that I've always wanted to do. But dude, I don't see me not wanting to do this anytime soon. Mace of Spades says, who's the best candidate for Money in the Bank next year? He says it's got to be Dom Mysterio. I don't know. Look, I would love for Dom to win Money in the Bank. I really would. I think they want that for like bigger deals. I think they want that for characters who really are going to be on the precipice, like legitimate characters who are going to be on the precipice of, the old Seth Rollins model. This year's Drew McIntyre is a very specific story beat that they told with that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I had to guess who was in line for Money in the Bank, it would be a CM Punk. They might bloodline the story. It might be a Jey Uso. They might go with like a Braun Breaker, or even at that point, depending on his time frame for coming back, maybe they'd want to give a push to Ilya, but I feel like when he comes back, they're going to want him to build him back up. So those are names, like legitimate title names. Even I would probably say Finn Balor would have a better chance than Dominic Mysterio. But if they build Dom in a certain way where he becomes more like a Chris Jericho 2001, 2002, then maybe. Mario Vela says, do you think WWE's product has an eventual end? Whether it's no longer desirable to watch or it ends on a series finale? Boy, that could be an interesting standalone video. I don't even know how I'd get started with that. Let's think about that for a second. So obviously this would be dependent on the WWE ratings cratering so bad that a viable television deal wouldn't be in the cards, or a streaming deal, which would be really shocking for that to happen. I don't foresee a time when that's going to happen. If something happened where their creative was so bad, and I mean, even when creative was really terrible, like in 2019, the comparative ratings to other entertainment program, Raw was still a well-rated program. Like, it still did pretty well compared to the other programs. There's a lot of people dogging AEW for their ratings, but comparatively in that time slot on Wednesday nights, it still does really, really well compared to other programming. So, do they have an eventual end from a business standpoint? I mean, everything ends eventually, but I don't know. I mean, if they're able to continue to maintain what relevance they have, it's like NFL, NBA, MLB, they've all lasted, and I know this is not a sport, but it's like, you can also look at, The Simpsons. You can look at, shows that are just continuing on and continuing on with no end. I don't know when the human race dies out. I honestly don't know. Ratings would have to be really, really bad for that to be the case. So, man, I don't know. It's a great question, though. That's a great question. MB1B173 says, any thoughts on Daniel Warren Johnson? He's a comic book artist and massive wrestling fan who incorporates wrestling moves into the fights in his books. Yeah, he did do a powerbomb, I think. Yeah, I saw that. He had Optimus Prime suplex a Decepticon. I love his art. I think it is phenomenal. Really great stuff. I didn't do a powerbomb a chance. I've always meant to, but like I got limited time in my hands. But no, I think that's great. I think anytime somebody that talented infuses their work with pro wrestling stuff, I think it's awesome. So yeah, I really like his work. Eastside Review says, who are some wrestlers in both WWE and AEW that have gotten a little stale, and how would you reboot them? In WWE, wrestlers I feel that have gotten stale, man, dude, I don't know. That's sort of a tough one. You got to ask yourself, like the Street Profits. They had that phenomenal ladder match, but it's not like ever since Lashley left, they've really done much in terms of their character. I'll be honest, guys, I really want Montez to have a singles run. Whether that's as still a member of the Street Profits or not, whatever. That dude needs to go on a singles run because I think that he's being kind of held back by being in the same role that he's been in. So there's an answer for you. I like what they're doing with The Miz. My answer probably would be The Miz. I feel like the Waller-Austin Theory relationship's getting kind of stale right now. You mentioned Darby Allin in AEW. Yeah, he hasn't really, his character hasn't grown much, but he's still really, really popular. And I still like Darby. I think Darby's good. It'll be interesting if he's the guy to take that title off Mox. Orange Cassidy, I'd like to see some development in his persona as well. So there's a couple answers for you. Oh, you said Street Profits. Okay. I didn't even notice even. Okay, Street Profits. Yeah, no, I agree with the Street Profits. We'll end on this one. Magic Eye says, will we ever see a WWE do a joint premium live event with another promotion like AEW does with New Japan, for example? WWE main roster, no. NXT, yeah, I could see that. I could see that being a possibility. Maybe they'll do a joint with TNA. Maybe they'll do a joint with Noah. But I don't see WWE doing a main roster joint promotion show. I don't see that happening. Because then they would be sort of like, oh, they're on the same level as us. And they don't really do that. That's going to do it for all the questions today. Be sure to sub to the channel and hit that notify bell so you guys are notified when I put up a new questions thread. I'm going to try to do this next week as well. Tomorrow morning or late tonight, whichever one works. I'm going to be putting up my next reaction video to the Reddit juice, which is the Reddit that I got for WrestleJuice. It's WREDDIT, Reddit with the W, juice, r/that. So make sure you become a member. We're over 500 members over there now, and I'll be reacting to stuff. So if you want me to react to something, be sure you become a member of the WrestleJuice Reddit. It's over there. Go do it. See you guys around.